lower floored buildings, and that was actually typical of those architecture built during the colonial years. The city is called Mexicali. Mexicali has about 115 years of history up until this year. Mexicali is the only one city developed initially by the Chinese people in Central and South America. According to Mr. Zhen, Mexicali was developed by the Chinese. What does it mean? When the Chinese people visited this area, Mexicali was nowhere to be found, right? Yes, in about 1903, the Chinese people took the first step on this piece of land. At that moment, there was no Mexican living here. Only the Chinese people were settling down here in 1903. In that year, the population of Chinese here is about 1,000. For the migrant Chinese workers coming firstly in Mexicali, what were they doing? Most of those Chinese people coming here was from Guangdong. In 1903, those people from China were quite poor. So when they visited Mexicali, they were the workers building the railways. Now, the river running across the city was actually maintained by the Chinese people. The railway leading to the U.S. from Mexicali is also done by the Chinese people. Just now, Mr. Zhen briefed us that the initial founders of the city Mexicali was the Chinese laborers, and according to Zhen, now the second largest city in Mexico, as well as the railway running towards the U.S., were all the results of the Chinese people. So actually, 100 years ago, the Chinese people already made their presence here. This live streaming is quite special because we know today is September the 30th, and we are going to embrace the National Day holidays very soon. Many netizens might now already enjoying their holiday at home. And this morning, our live streaming is designed for our domestic netizens so that they could have a snapshot about how the overseas Chinese are spending their days. Now we're going to invite Mr. Zhen to introduce to us several buildings behind us. The building opposite to us also has a history of 100 years. In 1975, it was rebuilt. It is the Chinese Assembly Hall. In the beginning, when we firstly visited such a place, we had a group of Chinese who decided to gather all of the Chinese people living around this area. That's why they built the Chinese Assembly Hall. And this Assembly Hall is very warmly welcomed by the locals. Like Mr. Zhen said, on the streets of Mexicali, we could deeply feel the friendliness of Mexicali locals towards the Chinese people. During this time, a lot of people passing by us have been saying hello to us. So we could feel the atmosphere about China-Mexican friendship here. We're going to visit indoor into these buildings. There is a group of Chinese students waiting for us. In our camera, you will see that the city is quite small. Mr. Zhen will tell us about the size of the city. It's a very small border city, but it is home to a lot of Chinese people, and this city enjoys a very close bond with China and the Chinese people. And interestingly, in Mexicali, we have the most delicious Chinese cuisine here in Mexico. Now we are walking across the lane to enter the China Assembly Hall, built in early 1900 and also rebuilt in 1975. I already went in before, and a group of Chinese students are right now waiting for us. What's inside this hall? Inside this building, there is a Chinese school with a history of about 100 years, and this school has generated a group of young Chinese. Those Chinese students and kids have always been growing up in this area and in our school, and in this building, we hope to carry on the traditions of Chinese civilization. So that's why our association pays high attention to the Chinese education style. From grade 1 to grade 6 in our school, we offer classes of both Chinese language and Mexican language. Students studying in this school, when graduate, will certainly exhibit their special talent and charm. Like Zhen said, from grade 1 to grade 6, the kids studying in the school could learn Chinese language. Now we are already passing by the kindergarten, and the kids are already reciting. Mr. Zhen is saying hello to the students. They are quite familiar. Now, could we ask our kids to say hello to our audience? Could you say hi to our netizens in both Chinese and Mexican? In Chinese? Okay. We're right on time. It's local time Saturday, and they are taking a class, and those kids are living and studying in multilingual environment. They could speak Mandarin, and they have a very fluent and proficient English and Mexican speaking skills. They also can speak Cantonese. Now, could we ask our professor to say hello first? Hello, everyone. Those kids are quite cute. Mr. Zheng, do they have to pay for the tuition? Basically, no tuition is involved. It's education for free. I've seen this classroom with very good equipment and facilities. Yes, we have about a dozen of professors, and also from grade 1 to grade 6, we have in total 200 students. Every one of those kids born in Chinese families will make a difference because they can speak different languages, particularly Chinese. Many local factories are in competition for those talents. And I also was informed that our teacher used to be a student of this school, and then she come back to be a teacher. Yes, could you introduce yourself? Hello everyone, my name is Liu Huiming. I used to be a student of the school by learning Chinese, and now I'm coming back to be an assistant teacher for Chinese class. And now I'm also a teacher for the other classes, particularly since I am a sophomore in the local university. So at weekends, I would come back for the kids to be the assistant teacher for extracurricular classes. Thank you, kids. Bye. See you next time. Just now, we have a brief meeting with a very small portion of the school. There are a lot of such classrooms and students and teachers here. It impressed me that such a large scale of teaching and education is happening here for Chinese kids with good equipment. And also, as I walk out of the building, I could feel that it's quite warm outside compared to the indoor with air conditioning. What is the weather here? Usually in this locality from July to September is very hot. At its peak temperature, it could be as high as 42 to 45 Celsius degrees. Right, 42 to 45 Celsius degrees. That's seldomly seen in China. Since I flew from Mexico to Mexicali today for this live streaming, the moment I landed on Mexicali, I could feel the temperature difference in the two cities. Now on the streets of Mexicali, I have a feeling about the hot temperature. But Mr. Zheng has no sense of that anymore. He seems to be already accustomed to this temperature. Today the temperature is 39 Celsius degrees. It's still very high for people like me, but for Chinese living long in Mexicali, they are quite used to this warmth. Every year, there usually are 9 months of cooler times in this city. It is not seeing very frequent natural disasters or strong winds. So many Chinese people really prefer living here. Now we have about 1,300 Chinese people living and inhabited here in this city. We are now walking towards the old town of Mexicali. Those several streets used to be the populated areas for the Chinese people in early years. On the 115th anniversary of this city, the Chinese people usually celebrate Zinkaska, which means the Chinatown. In 1925, there used to be about 400 shops opened by Chinese, and over 40,000 Chinese people lived here in this area in 1925. So this district is actually quite a remembrance of the Chinese factors. Now let's walk along those main roads. Those shops, are they opened by Chinese people? Yes, mostly by Chinese people. In the 1930s, people just walk in the shops and speak Chinese. And even the air tickets were printed in Chinese. That's why this place is quite famous, because of its Chinese essence. Now let's walk around the streets. Since it's already around the dusk time, that's why the city seems to be wearing on a different look, unlike 2 to 3 hours ago. Those are all Chinese shops. This shop has 50 years history. It's a branded old Chinese shop. Is it still managed by Chinese people? Yes. Has it always been selling shoes over the past 5 decades? Yes, always shoes. They produce those shoes locally and sell them locally. Let's come closer. So the shop has 50 years of history and it's still open. Is it still the business hour? Yes. Can we walk in? Sure. Let's walk inside. In the interest of time, we will not take you inside the shop. Just wandering about on the street, I could imagine that in the most prosperous years, this street must be home to a lot of shops. if you just click our website, you may not know that this town, like we said before, is an invisible Chinatown. What is the scale of the invisible Chinatown? We're going to present you very soon with our camera. On the streets of Mexicali, I feel like a great difference from the other border cities. Because of the wars between the US and Mexico, I paid visit to several border cities between the US and Mexico, but those border cities are greatly different from Mexicali. For example, Tijuana. On Mexicali streets, there are a lot of Chinese restaurants, and usually those shops have hundreds of years of history. It's quite commonplace. Later on, we're going to take you inside this invisible Chinatown. Why do we call it invisible? In 1920, when the city was firstly established, the weather was quite hot. So between July and September, the temperature could be as high as over 40 Celsius degrees with no fans or no air conditioners. That's why our ancestors used to go underground in order to cool themselves. That's why this Chinatown is actually underground. And in this area, people could just avoid the sunlight and communicate with the Chinese peers. So we call this Chinatown invisible Chinatown because usually the ancestor Chinese people dig underground in order to fend off the heat in those hottest months, and also in those underground spaces the Chinese ancestors gathered together for more communication and entertainment. And I heard that usually those underground areas are connected, even though the Chinese households dig underground in their own houses before, but later on through tunnels, those underground spaces were connected. So now this area, the La Chinesca area, underground, are connected in the majority. So this space is like an invisible town underground. That's why we call it invisible Chinatown. Next, we're gonna bring you to see something very interesting. We're gonna walk inside the community of underground Chinatown, but maybe because of the signal issue underground, there may be some flickering of our live broadcasting, so please excuse us if it happens. Like Mr. Zheng said, all of the overland architecture have their own underground spaces, and in the beginning years, those underground shops or spaces have been gradually connected, so people could walk freely underground and the Chinese people could communicate with their own wills. And now the area we are walking has maintained the majority of the previous looks. For example, this one next to us, this is a shop of clocks and watches. This is quite its original look, hundreds of years ago. How many years history does it have? 70 years? Starting from 1925 till now. So by 2025, it's going to be 100 years old. Yes. And also, I heard that the boss of this shop also is from China. Yes. He can speak Chinese, and his wife is a Chinese. This lady's father can speak very fluent Cantonese. The shop owner just shared with us that she was the second generation of Chinese coming here, and she carries on her family name. Her name is Rosie Chen. Chen is her family name, and her parents came from Guangdong. Now we're taking us to the back door of the shop. That is actually the entrance into more spaces in the Chinatown. Let's firstly look at those ornaments. This is cotton. Actually, this cotton has its specialty because cotton is a pillar industry for Mexicali City, including the first generation of Chinese coming here. They started planting cotton to support themselves. In about 1927, the Chinese ancestors have finished their building of the railways or the river. What shall they do next? Then the idea of planting cotton came to those Chinese ancestors. At that time, these Chinese people have developed the most advanced cotton industry here in Mexicali. So they were living upon cotton. Yes. Those are some old photos about those Chinese people, how they're living. We could feel that those Chinese people living now still have a strong bond for their Chinese ancestors. Yes, all of those people living here have a very strong bond for China. We are quite patriotic and we always keep China in our mind. After all, when the Chinese ancestors firstly arrived here, China was quite poor, but after 100 years, we have witnessed how China has been developing over the years. We were quite proud of China all over the years, particularly after the reform and opening up 4 decades ago. China has grown into a quite powerful and prosperous nation. So all the overseas Chinese nationals were thinking highly of China and the One Belt One Road initiative. I think our audience must be quite impatient to see more about this invisible Chinatown. Now let's open this door. It's right behind this door. You could see the steps. If we walk down another 3 to 4 meters, you could see a whole new world. Let's walk down. The steps are quite steep. A kindly reminder, there may be some signal problems later on because now we are entered deeper underground, so the signal will be poor. In this place, the ornaments are basically the same as years before, even though this place is not big. But one factory could be able to accommodate all of their employees underground in this space. After working time, they could just come down and enjoy the coolness in contrast to the 40 Celsius degrees outdoor. In the noontime, the outdoor temperature could be as high as 48 Celsius degrees, but in this underground space, it could be as cool as 15 Celsius degrees or at the utmost 30 Celsius degrees. So almost all Chinese factories have built their underground spaces. Those basements are quite similar. Basements like this, unlike my previous imagination, are quite high from the floor to the ceiling. It feels quite comfortable coming here. I could feel the stark difference of temperature. In 1935, with about 40 to 45,000 Chinese people living here in Mexicali, we were quite renowned for those basements, and the Chinese food here also is quite popular. Chinese food has become a local culture here. Those Chinese people settled down, get married, and drove their trucks. Chinese food has always been a main theme of people's lives. Now we have 200 Chinese restaurants in Mexicali with about 8,000 Mexicans working on those posts of those restaurants. So we are contributing a lot to the local job creation. That's why the locals are quite grateful to the Chinese people. Speaking of Chinese cuisine, since I've been working and living in Mexico City, the capital city of Mexico. So before I visited Mexicali, many people have been informing me that Mexicali has very delicious Chinese food. Today, I did try those Chinese food, and the food really are delicious, which honor their names. Even though Mexicali is not a big city on such a small scale, we have so many high-quality Chinese restaurants that's really stunning. But if you have a deeper understanding about the relationship between Mexicali and China, you would certainly understand why. After all, those Chinese people created a lot of jobs for the local Mexicans in those restaurants. That's why they built a very deep relationship. And also, that reshaped the local cuisine culture. For example, even the Mexicans get married. On the wedding ceremonies, they would prefer Chinese food offering for the guests. And also, the local people take the Chinese food as an important symbol of paying tribute to any guest to their homes. In the surrounding cities, we have many visitors coming here to enjoy the Chinese food. Mexicali is home to 1.2 million people, but every day we could have that same amount of people visiting from outside. Personally, I've tasted the Chinese food here, and also in those restaurants during my lunch or dinner. I have seen so many visitors in those restaurants, so that shows the popularity of those Chinese food and restaurants. Now let's look around those Chinese elements in the ornaments of those basements. They're all the legacies of Chinese. In different time, people have different experience, so maybe each basement may have different pictures and ornaments, and previously those basements were all connected, but now those basements are separated because of their different belongings and different histories. We still have a very large space of basement. For example, there is one basement as large as about 600 or 700 square meters. That's almost 30 times larger than this basement. Considering the weather here, particularly at 48 Celsius degrees in the noontime, that's unimaginable to me. I've never been living in such hot areas, but in early years when the Chinese people chose to settle down here and live their own lives and do their own businesses here, we could assume that those Chinese ancestors were really preferring this place with their diligence, their perseverance, and in the final analysis, they have developed such a beautiful city, and they are living quite a comfortable life here. We could see some things lying around on the ground. Those are all their daily necessities. It really impresses me. I've never visited such underground Chinatown before. It touches me a great deal. How about we come back to the streets? Thank you. It's very clean here. It's already dark outside, even though it's just half an hour, but it looks quite different from daytime. And also, we are approaching the end of this broadcasting. My name is Sheng Jialing from CCTV, and this is live streaming from Mexicali. And also, we want to thank Mr. Zhen. Mr. Zhen, could you say goodbye? Thank you for watching. So that's all for the streaming. Thank you.